I'd be keen to sort of hear from you. I do want to talk a little bit about the controversial side and the sort of negative feedback from the Shack, but on a positive sense, I'd be keen to hear, like, what sort of stories have you heard? When did you start sort of getting feedback from people from the Shack, and is there any sort of significant stories that you could share that stick out about
Oh,
it?
you're asking for a week, is what you're asking for.
Just give us the top, maybe three.
Oh my gosh. So, for something that you mentioned, a lot of us who grew up in the evangelical fundamentalist world, if you just look at fundamental, that's how they sucked you in. They said this is going to be fun, then you find out you're damned, and it makes you mental. And so,
Yep,
yeah,
totally
yep, pretty much.
testify to that.
It's right there. So, you know, I wrote a story on the train for the most part to one of my three jobs when we were living in a little tiny 900 square foot flat and rented. And Kim got a job at the high school bakery 2 blocks away. I'm cleaning toilets and doing shipping and receiving. We've got four of our six children still home. Two are in college on scholarships, and we had nothing. It was one of the best times of our lives, and it really was very difficult on the one side, but very, very freeing on the other side. That's when you're in that sort of spot, you have a choice to either freak out or learn that the opposite of more is enough. And we did. We learned that the opposite of more is not less. The opposite of more is enough. And and that was a very freeing time for us. So I didn't write this in order to publish it, in order to get an identity, in order to get some security. I made the 15 copies because I got some money at Christmas, and I had nothing else to give to my kids. And Kim, my wife, had been asking me to write something as a gift for our kids for about 4 years before this, and I did. Got it done, gave it to them for Christmas, and then so I gave the 15 copies, six to our kids. Kim got a copy, and the rest I gave to my friends. I went back to work, and didn't cross my mind one time to publish it. I'd done it, I'd made these things on a little photocopier at Office Depot, and and my friends started calling me up and saying, "Can I give this to my friends?" And I said, "Yeah, why not?" And so they did. And pretty soon I'm starting to get emails from people that I don't know. And they're not normal emails. They're not saying like, "Oh, this book has really, this was really a fun read," or "This was great." No, they're telling me, "Oh my gosh, this has absolutely changed the trajectory of my life." And then they would tell me their stories. So even around the story of how this all came to be, there are these little miraculous full circle kinds of golden thread stories that they're just incredible. But I'll give you a couple. I'll give you a couple of the ones that, and I'm talking, we have thousands.
Yeah,
Uh,
no doubt.
you know, in fact, one of the first emails that I got was from Australia, and a family wrote to me, and the book had already made it to Australia. This is like 3 or 4 months after, because nobody would publish it. So a couple guys in California created a publishing company, and one of them volunteered to ship books out of his house at night because he was putting in people's sprinkler systems into their yards during the day. But that's how much they believed in this story,
Yeah.
and it made it to Australia. I get a note, and the note says, "You have no idea what your book is doing here in our community. Um, 7 members, no, no, what they said is, we've had a huge abuse situation where our grandfather pastor has just passed away, and it's come to light that there's been huge abuse. And this is in a Protestant environment. And they said, your book is giving us a way through. 7 of us have been through the shack, four to go."
Wow.
And I mean, that's one of the first emails I get. Another one, I get this letter, this note from northern Alberta, up in Canada, and it's a photo. And I don't remember if they do this in Kiwi land or not, but uh, in the U.S. and Canada, if there's been an accident on the road, a lot of times they make a little roadside memorial. You'll see a cross.
Yeah,
You'll
yeah,
see
we
a
do. We do that. Yeah.
Okay, okay. And so this is a photo of a roadside memorial, and it was a situation was where a 4-year-old, yeah, had talked her dad into going to get them an ice cream cone, and both of them had been killed by an 18-wheeler, a big semi truck. And so they created this little memorial on the side of the road. But the reason they sent me the picture is on the post next to the memorial, someone had bungee corded a copy of the shack,
Oh
and
my goodness.
it was just like, this is what's going to bring us help. Now I'll tell you again one of those thousands of stories that I now have and have collected. And so the overwhelming response to the shack and Crossroads has been absolutely incredible. Now, the only ones who I've gotten pushback on are my own people, evangelical fundamentalists.
Yeah,
And
we'll get to that.
yeah, we will. The people who don't have to read it and know whether it's right or wrong. Anyway, but we'll talk about that. Ask me about the people who picketed me one time. Um, so here's a story for you. I'm doing a book signing in central United States, and when I do a book, because I never published a book before, and I have no clue about what you do at a book signing. Basically have no clue about any of this, and so I like to hug people. I think the world needs more hugs, especially safe ones, and so I don't sit behind a table, and I'll stand and talk to people in line, and I'll hug them. So this couple comes up to me, and there's a table behind me, and the woman just comes up and begins to sob, and and the man just walks over to the table and he begins to put down photographs on the table. And between the two of them, they tell me their story. A year prior to us meeting, um, and they'd never heard of the shack, but their 21-year-old daughter had been hit and killed by a drunk driver, and only child, and it had devastated this couple. And it had sent especially the mom into a tailspin, a really dark depression, and for months. And both of them were sort of lost as and that's why I built the story around the loss of a child, because to me it's the greatest loss a human being can experience. And it is also one that asks the best questions. So they're laying down these photos, and they tell me that they were really stuck, especially the mom. She could not climb her way out of the depression. She just, every time she got close to it, she would um, uh, something would spin her back into the abyss. And finally, her husband, in desperation, uh, approached her with an idea and said, maybe we need to get out of town for a couple weeks. Maybe we just need to go drive, take a road trip. There are two states next to us that we have never been in our entire lives. It's just absolutely different territory. And why don't we take 2 weeks and we'll just drive? We'll go find a bed and breakfast. We'll explore the area, and we'll just change the scenery and everything that keeps reminding us, that spins us back into this. And surprisingly, she said, I want to do that. So 8 months after the death of their daughter, they take this road trip, and they go a couple states over, and about 10 days into their road trip, they're 2 states away in territory that they've never been. And they decide they're going to get up in the morning, and they're going to get some stuff for a lunch, and they're going to make a lunch, and then they're going to go find a park, find a picnic bench, and sit in the park and have their lunch together. So and they've got pictures of everything, right? So they've got photographs, and so they pack up in the morning. They pack up their lunch and they go looking for a park, and it's a small little rural town, and it takes about 5 minutes to get out of town in any direction. And then there is just farms with roads and fields and fencing and mountains in the distant background, or hills. And they can't find a park. And they do concentric circles trying to find a park. You'd think they'd be able to find a park in this little town, and they couldn't find one. So they start going wider and wider around this town looking for a park. And about an hour and something later, they were almost ready to give up and go back and say, we'll just eat at the bed and breakfast that we stayed at. And the mother says, well, let's just try this road. And it was a paved road, and they took it about 5 or 6 miles way back into nowhere. And then she said, well, let's go down that one, which is a dirt road. So here's this couple 2 states away from home, in a place that nobody knows where they are, and they have no clue where they are. They don't know anything, right? And they're driving down this dirt road, and they get about a mile down this dirt road, and they look to the left as they're driving, and there's this huge field, and it looks like in the middle of the field there's a picnic table. And 50 yards beyond it, 50 meters beyond it, there is a fence, there is a little outbuilding of some sort, but other than that, there's nothing. There are no houses. It's just like ranch country. But it looks like there's a picnic table right in the middle of the field. And when you see the picture of it, it looks like a picnic table from the road. So they pick up all their stuff and they take it back. They pack it up and they say, well, there's nobody around. I mean, we'll eat there. Well, they get out to this thing and it's not a picnic table. It turns out to be the stoop, stairway going up to a flat surface where there used to be a house there, some kind of a homestead or something that had either years and years ago burned down and been hauled away. And all that's left is the steps and the concrete, steps and surface, concrete and stone. And so it's not really a picnic table, but it's got a flat surface. They haven't seen one. This is as close as they've got. So they decided, well, we'll just put our little tablecloth here and we'll eat our lunch, which they did. About halfway through the lunch, the wife looks out past toward the fence line and says, see that little outbuilding? There's a little sign above the door. It's a little oval-shaped sign, a white sign. Can you read what it says? And he's squinting and he goes, no, I'll go look. So he walks over there and he comes back and he says, it says the shack. It means nothing to them. He just says, it says the shack. Huh. Okay. Well, they finish eating. They pack up. They're on their way back to the car. And she suddenly stops, the mom. And she says, I'm going to go in there. And her husband is confused and says, oh, you're going to go in where? She says, the shack. I'm going to go in the shack. He goes, I don't know if that's a good idea. What if there's somebody actually living in this? This is a little tiny one, very, very small little shed. What if there's somebody in there? She goes, I don't care. So she heads off and he follows her over and she doesn't knock, nothing. She walks right into this little outbuilding and they've got pictures of every wall inside this and no windows. It's got 4 walls. It's got on one wall, there's a desk. On the desk, there's a light. There is a sign-up sheet of some sort. There's a notice. And then there are 2 copies of a book that they've never heard. And the notice says, please take whatever you need. And the sign-up shows that a dozen people have come by and signed their names and what states they were from or whatever. And she picks up one of the copies of the book. And I'm in this receiving line to sign it. And she picks it up and it's the shack. And she says to me, she is weeping. She says, this book saved my life.
Wow. Wow.
So somebody had been touched in their heart by reading the book, and they set up this little tiny shed out in the middle of nowhere. And God was just leading people out in the middle of nowhere in order to give them a copy of the shack. Yeah. And you just go like, you couldn't make that up. And I'm looking at the photographs and it is exactly what they're telling me. And that is one of the thousands of stories.
Wow. Oh, that's incredible. That's amazing.